You're now live.
We are live. We are back in session. Senator McDonald, your question.
The witness suggested that we combine the best of the two bills before us, and that's what we're here trying to do. And I think he mentioned that there were some enterprises that had spoiled the bathwater, I think was his expression. Mm-hmm. And as we seek to try and merge these two different proposals, we're trying to avoid throwing out the bathwater and throwing out the baby at the same time to make something backwards. How do we separate the companies that don't appear to spend their money on building out, and those who would send it to the stockholders and enjoy their current monopoly status? That's my question to the witness.
Sure. I think I addressed it in the last paragraph of my statement. I'm not looking to penalize any national providers. I'm just recognizing that they have sufficient capital to do what they need to do, whereas the other providers don't have sufficient capital to expand as quickly as needs to be done. And that's why we should make a distinction. And in my answer, in my testimony, I stated that it could be based on whether the provider is a community-based, local, small provider. And I suggested a couple of definitions might be utilized. You could come up with your own. In House Energy and Technology, I proposed the definition, but right now I won't repeat that one. You could just use either USDA or SBA's definition of small company. There are many other agencies that define small companies. I think you would want to stick with Vermont-based companies and companies that have been actually already doing the work. Does that answer your question, Senator McDonald?
It does. I guess it does without calling names, and which is the best you can do for us tonight. Thank you.
I think we should say that Senator McDonald is expressing his own opinions, that this committee has reached no conclusions of its own, including whether or not the bathwater is dirty.
Right. We all understand.
I was quoting the witness, Madam Chair, and everyone on here that is speaking, that is a member of this committee, I'm sure is expressing their own committees and their desire to seek a remedy. Thank you.
That's right. And once we vote or reach a decision, then we can say we. But at this point, we are in listening mode and being overwhelmed mode, I think. Okay, we've had a change in the agenda. Because Erica Smith and Jeff Austin have a hard stop. So Jeff or Erica, I don't know if you've set this up in any order. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll just start briefly. My name is Erica Smith. I wanted to just take the time. I'm the Director of Legislative and Regulatory for Consolidated Communications in Vermont. Just to say thank you for having us. We're glad to be here. Thank you to Ellen for agreeing to switch times with us. We appreciate the accommodation. Jeff Austin, who you all know, is our Senior Director for Fiber Build Strategy for Consolidated Communications nationwide. And because of that and the topic at hand, I thought it would be helpful to have him be your primary point of information today. So I'm going to stop at that in the interest of time and let Jeff go ahead. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Erica.
Welcome.
Thanks, Erica. And thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. It's nice to see everyone again. For the record, Jeff Austin, Senior Director of Fiber Build Strategy for Consolidated Communications. Just a couple things. I've been listening to testimony here today. A couple things kind of up front. Consolidated Communications, a publicly traded company with headquarters in Mattoon, Illinois, who is the largest incumbent local exchange carrier, here in Vermont. Everybody kind of knows the history, consolidated purchase of Fairpoint Territories, Fairpoint purchase of Vermont Territory that was previously owned by Verizon. So there's certainly everybody's aware of a lot of that history. So about broadband, going to try to keep this brief, but there's a lot here. So there's also, I want to make sure that I hit everything that is applicable. So we're talking about broadband, we're talking about fiber, we're talking about a lot of federal dollars, available, potentially federal dollars available, and how to spend that with the ultimate goal of getting as many or everybody covered in Vermont, or at least access to fiber internet services that are affordable and reliable. That's kind of how I've been interpreting kind of where we're going here. So on that note, just so everybody's kind of clear, kind of where I'm starting from here, Consolidated covers about 7,800 square miles of Vermont. That's about, I would say 75% of the service territory in Vermont. And today in Vermont, we have less than 1% fiber to the premise availability. So we've probably 3,900 miles of fiber now, but as it relates to fiber to the premise, residential, small business class fiber to the premise services available, we have less than 1% of that today. What I'm going to go through real quick here is how we're changing that today. We have a plan in place over the next 5 years with our private funding of over $140 million to change that 1% to over 70%. So there's a lot of complementary stuff here from what the committee's talking about that I think is going to be really important as the next week comes and you guys have these conversations. So to kind of kick that off, as I mentioned, Consolidated on a private investment is investing over $140 million to build over 200,000 locations in Vermont over 5 years with a capacity of providing multi-gigabit symmetrical internet service. I know you guys have heard these terms a lot of times. Gigabit, I'm sure you're all familiar with. Symmetrical is the same speed download and upload. And obviously we're talking multi-gigabit with scalability within our network to actually get up to 10 gigabit symmetrical. It's not what we're going to roll it out. We're rolling out 1 gigabit symmetrical, but we're building the network to support 10 gigabit. And just a little bit more kind of on our build, our fiber expansion program is more in Vermont is more than just building fiber to homes. We're upgrading our core network. This is basically the network between the central offices, which you guys see in your towns. We've got about 95 of them around the state, that transport our customers' internet traffic from their central office ultimately to the internet. So you need to have a robust core. You need to have the robust links to get people to the internet. We're also upgrading our central office access equipment and power and all of the equipment needed that is the connection between the core and the customers. So millions of dollars for upgrading the core, millions of dollars for upgrading the access, and we're spending millions of dollars to build out fiber to the multi-gigabit symmetrical fiber to the premise services. We're going to be building, just on our own project, over 2,000 miles of fiber in the next 5 years. We have RDOF funding, which is very complementary to our fiber build out to get even further into these towns and areas. So what we're building here is what our vision was. It's what Consolidated's vision was when they purchased the territories here. We had Fairpoint built a lot of fiber, but we built a lot of fiber, but it was to remote terminals with DSL equipment. We have about 1,000 of them in the state. And that was the network architecture that Fairpoint utilized. But Consolidated looked at the opportunities in this area and said, we've got a lot of fiber. We can get to building out a ton of fiber to the premise here in Vermont. So that ultimately was Consolidated's vision. We now have a strategic investment partner, Searchlight Capital Partners, that's investing about $425 million of capital into the company. And again, all of that is really building the foundation of us getting closer to the finish line in our territory, 7,800 square miles of ubiquitous fiber service to all locations. Our fiber, just to give you guys some perspective, our fiber expansion program build started on January 4th of 2021 in Montpelier and Brattleboro. We've run over 220 miles of fiber so far this year. We're building more every day. This is fiber to the prem fiber to the premise fiber. We've made new services available to over 5,000 locations in Vermont. And in 2021, we plan to bring fiber services to over 50,000 locations. So we're building, again, this is just to kind of illustrate, we're building this. By the end of 2021, we anticipate we will have built over 650 miles of fiber for fiber to the premise services here in Vermont. The ultimate goal is going to be well over 200,000 locations. And like I mentioned, we've got RDOF really, that's going to help support that. And then if you think about state funding, federal funding, we're building the core network. We're building fiber to as many places as we can with our private investment. And so we're building fiber to about 70% of our locations over the next about 5 years. That's a really good start. That's a really good foundation to then build off of. The timing is short. 5 years seems like an eternity in some situations, but it's a finish line, right? It gives us a goal that everybody's working for. So as I mentioned, any additional funding will just allow us to build out further. And there's economies of scale. If we're out building in Brandon, for example, in Brandon, Vermont, and there's money available to build out more locations in Brandon. If we were there already, there's going to be economies of scale that are going to be able to be realized as we're building out even further. So I think I've mentioned this to the committee before. We're not looking at a lot of make-ready. We're overlashing our existing facilities, our existing pole attachments on the poles. We don't need pole surveys. We're going to handle that all ourselves. The conduits, the manholes, all of the stuff that we have is just part of our network today. It's really allowing us to build quicker in the most efficient way, utilizing every dollar that we can to actually build out fiber to these locations. So there's talk about accountability and things like that I wanted to just kind of throw out that Consolidated has received state, federal funding programs. There is a CAF programs, lots of state, programs, and we have used all that money as intended, with jobs completing on time, and given the opportunity here, which sounds like a really amazing opportunity for Vermont. Given the opportunity here, we will do the exact same thing. We will deliver on any requirements related to expanding fiber, with these federal and state dollars. Some of the things that I think may get overlooked by our history, right? There's been history with the predecessor companies, Consolidated, as they took over the territories, getting its feet wet, understanding the region, really, getting ahead of things. We're also a very, very important community member. We donate space in 3 of our Vermont locations. Right upstairs from me, Vermont Center of Emerging Technologies in Burlington that supports over 600 members, entrepreneurs, thinkers, doers. Everybody wins in Vermont in our Montpelier office. They provide reading mentoring services when school's in session. Even now we're doing it when school's not in session, finding creative ways to over 400 mentor and school-age readers. And we've done that for the last 20 years. Center for Cartoon Studies in Vermont. Erica and I have driven all over the state handing out checks to Bennington Project Independence, Vermont, Central Vermont Basic Education in Barrie, Spectrum Youth Services. So as it relates to kind of what we do and how we do it, we are Consolidated Communications. Our headquarters is in Mattoon, Illinois. We are a publicly traded company, but we do a lot of work here in this state. We've got a lot of employees. We've got over 225 employees supporting our Vermont network. We've got a lot of fiber that we're building. And I think a couple of folks talked about, you can string the lines all day, but if people can't afford them, then it doesn't do everybody, a lot of good. So we have an eye on affordability. As we're building out this fiber to the prem network, we're looking at price packages starting at 50 meg symmetrical, so 50 meg up and download and upload. For probably for the first year, this is estimates, $35 a month. That will likely go up at year 2 to $55 a month, but you're looking at a 50 meg symmetrical at $55 a month. So really looking in with affordability, expanding broadband, affordable, reliable services. And as it relates to this discussion that we're having, we're really looking for a level playing field, not a level playing field. There's a lot of discussion about the smaller companies and the Vermont companies, and these companies are extremely important to the core of Vermont. And we've worked with Kim and Michael, and we've worked with Roger and all of these companies for years. So what we'd be looking for, obviously, is just a level playing field. We're building an incredible network of fiber to the premise, and this opportunity really gives everybody an opportunity to say, how do we get to the finish line? The most efficient and effective way to get to the finish line. Consolidated, we're building out this large network, but we also have a proven track record of public-private partnerships. I'll talk about CUDs in a second, but we completed 5 complete fiber build towns in New Hampshire. Actually, we just finished those up in early 2021. We have another 14 that we're planning on starting to build this year. We've got a couple in Maine. So this whole idea of partnering, right, of working through things and getting collaborative with communities, something that we may not have been good at that. And I've been here 27 years. Erica's been here a long time. There was a period of time where it was a lot harder. But again, the vision of coming in, creating these communities and creating these bonds. Just a couple other quick things, and then just to wrap up. That structure, the Department of Public Service has been managing grants, connectivity grants, the connectivity initiative for years. They've got criteria, they've got the expertise. We really think that they would need more people, right? Because this would be a potentially huge program. But we really think that having the Department of Public Service or an entity managing those funds, managing the awarding of those funds, managing the reporting, would really be the right group. So just throwing that out there, that I really think that like the Department of Public Service who's got this, who's already got a plan, who's already done this before, it probably has the right structure to be able to manage this. And again, almost kind of wrapping up, we have had a lot of conversations with CUDs, right? So New Hampshire, lots of public-private partnerships, lots of conversations with CUDs. But as we're looking at the language and we're talking about the bill and we're trying to figure out how we get from point A to point B, still not positive what's meant by a partnership with a CUD. I wasn't sure does it mean that we met with them and we talked about broadband? Does it mean that we have a non-disclosure agreement and we talked really even more about broadband? Does it mean that we responded to an RFP with a CUD? Because today, I personally, and a group of other folks in the company, we're doing all of those. We're not doing all of those with every CUD, but we're doing all of those with multiple CUDs. So we're doing all of these today, but in the end, if the money goes to the CUDs and the CUD decides whatever the scorecard is, not to choose Consolidated, we're still building out this 5-year program. We're still building our RDOF program. We're investing this money and we're building a lot of fiber to the prem. So we're just concerned that there's the possibility that we're excluded. And maybe there's an opinion that, hey, if we're giving the money to the CUDs, then you're on level playing field. You can bid and work with the CUDs like anybody else can. Well, but what are the rules? There's not a lot of rules that we can see that really give everybody, okay, this is exactly how it's going to work. So we're definitely concerned about being excluded from the possibility, knowing that this is an amazingly complementary program that Roger mentioned $65 million maybe to finish his build out. Consolidated believes if we had about $100 million, we could finish along with our investment and along with RDOF, we could build to all of the other locations in our territory in Vermont. So we're looking at things strategically, but we are building a lot of fiber. And the last note I have here, this is transformational for the residents of the state of Vermont. This is potentially a one-time go about it. And like I said, we believe Consolidated with our fiber expansion program, we're well positioned. Vermont's not the only state doing this. Maine is looking at $129 million broadband earmark. When you're talking about companies who have relationships with vendors who can get fiber, who can get materials. Getting materials and resources to build out this much fiber in this small amount of time, that is something that people should consider. We've got a lot of vendors, we've got a lot of vendor partners that we work with, dedicated fiber, vendor partners. So I think everything kind of being said here, I think Consolidated is an extremely valuable member of the team that helps the state of Vermont get to the end result of getting fiber everywhere. And we just want to make sure that we have a fair shot at doing that, of being part of this, of being part of the solution. We're helping get to a point of building our core and our network that this really could help everybody get to the finish line. So I thank the committee for the time and available for questions.
Okay, Senator Bray.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. I have a quick question. Can you explain the RDAP money and is this and how it compares to? It sounds like the private investment of 140 into the build out.
Sure. Yeah. So our 140 million, that's the private money that we're investing here in Vermont with fiber build out. The Vermont RDOF, the federal program, is about $1.9 million, $1.9 million a year. Let me just kind of double check that to make sure. Yeah, $1.9 million a year to get 10,123 locations. So we will use that funding to build out to those 10,123 locations. And I'm glad you asked that, Senator Bray. To get to those final locations, we're going to be passing other people, right? We're going to build our fiber. And now you've got a gap potentially between where we stop and where these RDOF locations are. And in order to get to the RDOF locations, we're going to have to pass other people. So there'll be a residual benefit for other locations based on our build and the RDOF build.
Okay. The other quick question is, so you were the vision over the next 5 years is to get to 70% of addresses. How do you choose who's that's? I mean, so that's good news. But the other side of the coin is 30% of addresses won't have services at that point. And how do you decide who the 70% is versus who the 30? Is this going to be based on density?
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. It's how do we get them? We don't have unlimited funds, right? We don't. If we had $500 million for Vermont, that would be different. But if we're looking at the 144 million that we do have, that we plan to invest in Vermont, it's how do we get the most passings for that $140 million? And density is certainly one of the big factors of that. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Jeff, just to be clear, when you say doing 70%, that's 70% of your present area. I think you're in my backyard. Somebody's stringing cable through my backyard.
You're in
Montpelier.
Montpelier, is that correct, Madam Chair?
I'm in Montpelier, yeah.
That would be us. So we would, yes, we're going to run fiber past 70% of the locations in our service territory. Yeah.
Okay, in your service area.
Yeah.
So not other service areas are unserved. Plus you got these RDOF addresses, RDOF, that you are also having federal funding to get to. I assume they're contiguous with your service area.
Yeah, our service area, and there's a map on the Department of Public Service website, or we'd be happy to provide it. All of the RDOF fundings in our service territory or RDOF locations are in our service territory today. So, we provide in our service territory service to every location, like the smaller ILECs do, whether you're on the back of Norton Pond or whether you're downtown Montpelier. So we cover every address, carrier of last resort. If you move somewhere, you want service, we build it to you. And
if I could interject just for a second, I think another witness mentioned also that we are receiving RDOF funding But we anticipate that will cover what we do receive, approximately 30% of the cost of building out those locations. So even for the RDOF areas, we are committed to contributing our own funding as well to make sure that that work is done.
And you also have a low income program subsidy, is that correct?
Oh, you're on mute, Erica, sorry.
You also have a low income subsidy program?
Yeah, what I was going to say is, as Kim mentioned, we participate in the federal Lifeline program. So if a customer is determined to be eligible, that discount can be applied to their broadband or telephone service, depending on what options they have. So.
Okay. So that may be one advantage for being for profit. You have profit to invest. Okay, Senator McDonald. Senator, you're muted.
Madam Chair, I would like the witnesses to give us a ballpark figure on the following. Today, the building that the construction that they're doing is in Montpelier. Montpelier has 25.3 generally, which is viewed by the federal government as high-speed broadband. This committee is seeking to get broadband to places that are unserved or underserved. How much money would Consolidated take to stop providing the services in the 25.3 areas that are already considered to be high-speed internet by the federal government, and to devote their attention to the and underserved areas in the state of Vermont that they talk about serving 5 years from now? And how much money would it take for them to serve those areas first instead of serving fiber into the places that are already considered high-speed internet? What would the dollar figure be, or what would the ballpark be?
Yeah, Senator McDonald, thanks for the question. Just kind of, this is probably the best way to answer that is, we anticipate to get everybody in our service territory fiber over and above our build that we're doing now with our private investment and RDOF, that it would take approximately $80 to $100 billion to complete that build. Now, specifically to your question, we have to build out our core network and our central office first. That is where all the internet connections go back to. As we're building out that central office, we then have to run fiber out of the central office to get to everywhere. So we're going to have to run fiber through Montpelier to get to East Montpelier and to get to Moortown. So I wouldn't say that we can do it in parallel though. So I wouldn't, to your exact question, Senator, we're going to continue our build. So there's not like an amount of money that says Consolidated, stop doing what you're doing and now go build the rural areas. We have to build in these downtown areas first to get to the rural areas, but we can do it in parallel. We can do that as the same project. We don't have to have separate projects if we have the funding available to us.
Madam Chair, the witness perhaps misunderstood my question, or I was not clear. I'm in Montpelier now, and I have watched in the last few weeks where fiber is being sent to every nook and cranny of Montpelier. And that these areas have generally 25.3. That was my question is, what would it take in the way of money for you to stop going to every nook and cranny that's already has high-speed internet by federal definition and go to the unserved and the underserved areas of Vermont that we intend to have served and to spend money to have served? How much money would you take to go there and do that first?
Well, let me answer it this way, Senator, to make sure that I'm answering your question specifically. We have to build the fiber out of the central office first. And those
I understand that. That's not my question. My question isn't how
You want to know what it would take to get him to run a line straight down Route 12 to the hills of Roxbury. and
No.
leave the rest of his,
That's
well,
not
I
my
believe,
question.
Senator, in defense, you have been very clear that 100 is the state standard. And I believe the bill that came to us defines 25-3 as underserved. Either that or the commissioner defined 25-3 as underserved. So I don't think we can flip those around when it suits us. Is 25-3 underserved or isn't it?
That wasn't my question, Madam Chair.
I know. Well,
question
your
is,
question was, what would it take him to stop doing the side streets in Montpelier and do what he had to do? Can I remember the whole diagram with the box, and you can't hit cable the fiber? So just to do what he had to do in Montpelier, to run a line straight out to the unserved areas and do those unserved areas, I assume with either 25-3 or 100 before or instead of doing downtown Montpelier.
Yes, my question is, how much money would they have to be paid in grants to do that?
We would do all of it with $80 to $100 million in grants.
And you would stop putting the fiber in the areas that are 25-3 and go and do the fiber in the countryside first?
We would do it all at the same time, Senator.
That wasn't my question.
No, I'm
Thank you.
answering.
Thank
No,
you.
I understand.
I think, Senator, they're doing downtown Montpelier with their own money. I'm not sure we can tell a private company where they have to spend their own money, except.
We're not. We're asking how much we would have to pay them as a private company to go to the
He has
places we
answered
would
that
like them to
question.
go to.
Okay, Senator, he has answered that question.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Senator Hardy,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Erica.
nicer to me, to the witness.
I always try. Thank you, Eric and Jeff, for being here. I have a comment and then a question. And, I was interested in your ask that we try to make a level playing field. And, I guess it's how we all define level playing field, and probably everybody on the screen has a different definition, because you're a much, much bigger entity and company with a lot more resources than the witnesses we heard from before you. So I guess, a level playing field for them is different than a level playing field for you. So I just wanted to say that, and I'm guessing you understand that. But yesterday we had a long conversation about the definition of partnership, and you brought up that same issue. And I was scrolling through trying to find an H360 how it defines partnership, but I couldn't quite find it. But do you have a suggestion for how to define partnership? Because I do know that you work with CUDs and work with how you define that. Obviously, meeting with somebody is doing work, but do you have a proposed definition to define partnership?
Yeah, I would like to see if we engage with the CUD in good faith, and again, how do you put the parameters around that? But if a company has engaged a CUD in good faith to discuss broadband deployment, basically costs, maybe responded to an RFP, really, I think that's how I would define that we worked in good faith on trying to create a partnership, and potentially if somebody was able to check those boxes, even though maybe the CUD chose another partner, that they may still be able to have access to the federal or to the state funding somehow. It's really tough, but I appreciate that.
Okay, I guess I would like a definition that would be actionable. Like,
Sure.
For example, we had a story yesterday from one of the directors of the CUDs that I'm not sure if it was your fiber, but I think it might have been, that they were like a third of the mile away from where your fiber was. And if there was a way to connect that 1/3 of a mile, and you helped them do that through a partnership, and you put your sources into it and they put theirs, and you actually had some kind of contract, that to me would be a partnership. Like you're both putting something into it and actually getting something concrete. Somebody's getting connected because you partnered with this CUD. So that's what I'm trying to get at, because I do think, you, and because your territory is so large, you probably have a role to play in helping the smaller entities, I hope, do their work. And I think that's probably important, but we need to come up with a better definition of what it means to be a partner, and what that you've got skin in the game or fiber in the game, so anyway, if you have ideas
I could
that you
just
want to send
interject
to us, that would be helpful.
Not to
Erica
cut
has
you
a-
off. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I've listened to a lot of the testimony, and I've spent a lot of time talking to Jeff and other people in our company. And I think that's a really good question. And I think we can try to help find an answer, but I think it requires everybody sort of talking about that, because I've listened to the testimony repeatedly and thought, I don't know what that means. And I'm not sure there is a clear definition in the bill. And so I would just say that probably deserves more conversation around the table.
Totally.
So if anybody, Kim is still here, Michael, anyone, has a better definition, I would at least, nobody's speaking for the committee, but I would at least appreciate a better definition. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Pearson.
It seems like the House construct is that the money goes through the CUD. So rather than the state defining what a partner is, it seems like that's the way you get access to the money, is by working through the CUD. That's not what you want, I gather, but that doesn't seem particularly unclear to me. That's the only option as it's entertained, passed by the other house, right?
That's what it feels like, I think.
Yes.
But it's not, I get, my point is, it's not a definition challenge. It's just, it's a construct that you don't support. And I can appreciate that, but they're not trying to say, well, if you're good and trying to work with the CUDs, but you don't work with them, you can have this money. That is not what their aim is, I guess, is my only point.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Senator. And that's what we're trying to firm up. What does that mean? Negotiating a good faith, getting a contract signed with them for the entire CUD territory, for part of the CUD territory, just that amount of specificity.
Okay, committee. We've got one more witness, and then at 4:30, we have our final witness from Vida, because we moved the other two witnesses till tomorrow, but we can't move her because she's not available. So I'm going to move on to Ellen Katz. If there are no more questions, comments. Okay, thank you, everyone. Ellen.
Good afternoon, Chair Cummings and the members of the committee. Thank you for having me here today. I know it's late, and so I will try to be brief. My name is Ellen Katz, and I am the Vice President of Utilities at Tilson. Tilson is on a mission to build America's information infrastructure. We are headquartered in Portland, Maine, and we design, build, operate, and own telecommunication infrastructure all over the country. Our company has a long history and relationship with the state of Vermont. And as of December, we are now providing world-class fiber broadband in Lunenburg, St. Johnsbury, and Danville through our ISP, Tilson Broadband. I've included a map of our network, which I've also included in my testimony, which I filed yesterday. And once complete, our network will provide speeds of up to 10 gigabits per second to more than 1,100 addresses, including 578 previously unserved and underserved premises. And I have set this up with Ms. Brown. I'm going to share my screen just to show you a couple quick slides, if I may.
Go ahead.
Yep.
There we go.
Hopefully the technology will be working. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. And
Okay. So this is our network. And as you can see, it is serving some of Vermont's most unserved areas. And then I also would like to show you, this is a speed test from a screenshot of Tilson Broadband. The speed test was conducted in St. Johnsbury to a server in Boston. And this shows download speeds of over 7 gigabits, not megabits, gigabits, and upload speeds of over 3 gigabits. And I'm going to stop sharing because that's all I have for that. And so
Kingdom Fiber that is doing the Concord. We saw pictures of that yesterday. And are you working with Northeast Kingdom?
we are actually doing work with Northeast Kingdom, but we are not doing work with Northeast with Kingdom Fiber per se. I just want to comment back to the prior. Okay. Yeah, I just want to, on the last slide I showed of the speed test, before we connected that customer, the only connection available to them was unable to get download and upload speeds of 25-30. So significant improvement. So this network was made possible by grants from the state of Connecticut, Vermont, the COVID-19 Emergency Connectivity Initiative, and the Get Vermont Connected Initiative funded through the CARES Act. And it exists because of funding provided by the state of Vermont. We're grateful to Commissioner Tierney and her staff, who have been great partners both before and during the build, and to this committee for the leadership and the opportunity it provided. To us, this is an excellent example of how targeted state intervention can help close the digital divide. And I just want to comment that, we work as consultants, service providers, infrastructure owners in every state in the nation, pretty much. But Vermont is really unique in the breadth and the depth of its commitment to closing the digital divide. In our work, we've built strong and collaborative relationships with several of the state's CUDs, including NEK, Lamoille, Southern Vermont, and CB Fiber. We've also worked very effectively with Velco, Green Mountain Power, Vermont Electric Co-op, Vermont Public Power Supply Association, and other stakeholders on modeling and deployment. And there really is a sense that all of these entities share a common commitment to ensuring that all Vermonters have the connectivity they need. And that sense of mission and sense of urgency, including that I sense from this committee, has made our work here in Vermont easier. But I'm not going to say it's easy because, as you've heard, serving rural America is a challenging task. But we're optimistic about the opportunities to expand our network, and we look forward to serving as many customers as possible. Vermont is not, to paraphrase one of Tuesday's speakers, a rounding error to Tilson Broadband. And we also appreciate that we are providing an essential service to consumers who have no other options in many instances. We have therefore applied and been qualified to offer the Federal Communications Commission's emergency broadband benefit to our customer, which provides up to $50 per month for a home broadband connection. This will further, I think, our collective mission of broadband, providing broadband to as many unserved and underserved Vermonters as possible. We'd like to make two specific comments on the proposed legislation. Financing and loan programs are an important component of state and federal programs, but low-cost financing alone is not necessarily enough to build networks in the most rural, underserved areas of Vermont. Grants are necessary for these projects to proceed. The economics of rural projects are very, very difficult because there's typically very low customer density combined with high construction costs. And those of you that live in Vermont are certainly aware of that, as the mountainous nature of the state does drive up construction costs. And any program adopted by the legislature we recommend should include grants as well as low-cost financing. And while the bill before you would direct funding to the CUDs, other legislation would permit grants directly to service providers. Our network was built with a direct grant, and we would pursue those opportunities if they're available. However, as described above, we worked previously with many of the state CUDs and would welcome the opportunity to partner with the CUDs by serving as an ISP, providing technical expertise or design build work to ensure they are successful in closing the digital divide in their communities as well. So thank you for your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? I'm not, Senator Bray.
Thank you, Ms. Katz. I was on this committee, I think it was 7 years ago, when we wrote into law the 100-100 spec. And that was us trying to look far enough down the road that we would aim for something that would be durable for the long haul. But today's witnesses have, you and others have talked about gigabit speeds. So I just have a question, you know, is our 100-100 spec durable enough, or is the hardware, at least the fiber components of the network, going to be upgradable so that if 100-100 in 5 years looks a little on the slow side, we might be replacing optronics, but we won't be running new cable.
Yes, yes. We agree with the prior witnesses who talked about 25.3 being probably too low of a standard. So we think, you know, that 100-100 is attainable and frankly, probably a good target for now. The beauty of fiber is it's, you know, let's say it's future proof. You can increase the speed simply by changing the equipment at the ends. You can do, depending on how much fiber you have, virtually unlimited bandwidth through fiber if you have enough of it and you change the electronics. So it is able to respond in the way that you're suggesting. If 5 years from now everybody needs a minimum of a gig, fiber can do that for you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Ellen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, take care.
How many minutes have I got here? Couple. Committee, tomorrow we're going to have discussion and we're going to start breaking out into smaller pieces this whole area, and then start delving into each one of those. I want to start talking about what our goals are. What do we want to achieve? And because that will drive some of the other decisions that we make. And then the last thing I'm going to do is governance structure, because to me, that should develop out of the other things we decide we're going to do. So we've booked a couple things in next week's agenda, but I've left areas open so that we can have committee discussion and have kind of select witnesses, and not even witnesses, people help us think through the issues that we determine. I'm looking for decision points, and I've been jotting them down for me. But it would give you something to think about in all your free time between now and tomorrow. And then we're going, a lot has been talked about financing and loans. And we have not heard from VITA. Well, we didn't hear from VITA last year. We usually have an annual check-in with VITA, but because we were all sent home, we did give VITA some money and some backup to cover losses, and some loans that could be made to CUDs to help them get started until they were able to do revenue bonds. And as we think about banking and grants and loans and who's going to do them, VITA might be something we could think about. And Cassie Polomus, I hope I didn't massacre that, is here. And Cassie, welcome, and just talk to us a little bit about what VITA's role has been, what it could be, what you do. We have some new members on the committee. Just talk to us.
Thank you. Don't worry, it's Polemus, and everybody, it's a tough name, silent H, so you did well. Thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm sorry that I'm keeping you from enjoying this beautiful day. So I will try and keep
No,
my...
you aren't. Some of us have another meeting after this, so
Okay, so I'm not the only
you are not the only culprit, no.
Okay. Well, nevertheless, I will endeavor to keep my remarks as brief as possible, but I am happy to take as many questions as you have. I'm on the agenda to address VITA's role in H360, but I thought I would maybe just start briefly by, and you made an excellent introduction, by revisiting what the broadband loan program is right now. So VITA has a broadband loan program. It's relatively new. Less than 2 years ago, the legislature did pass Act 79, which created the VITA broadband loan program. It is a small program, and it was intentional in that regard, in that we were not sure exactly what we were getting into as far as the volume and where things were going with CUDs, as well as it being a very new area of lending for VITA. And so many of you are familiar with VITA, and I'm sorry that we did not have a chance to visit last year and have our touch-in, but VITA is the state economic development lender. And with the passage of that bill less than 2 years ago, VITA did receive some state support in the form of money for loan loss reserves, as well as additional moral obligation from the state treasurer. To date, so one moment, I'll back up a second. The program is small. So, and by small, I mean small relative to the need of broadband, which you've been taking testimony for quite a while now, and you know that the need is tremendous out there. So the program is, it's a $10.8 million cap. The loan size is a maximum of $4 million. And this is a highly unusual loan program for VITA, in that normally VITA is just one slice of a capital stack. So in other words, VITA is one piece of a financing group to put together a transaction. In the case of broadband, for these startup build out projects, there is no private capital, no traditional commercial banks and so on that are lining up at the gate saying they want to finance these projects. They're high risk, and that's written right into the legislation. And so VITA is the only lender in these transactions, or it's not required that there be other lenders. We're not the subordinated lender. We can lend up to 90% is how it's written. But that creates tremendous risk for the authority. And these are transactions where in a startup situation, there's no revenue that can support that debt and repay it for a while. So you're taking that startup risk for a while until you get to that point where you've got those subscribers and that revenue can then be, pay back the loans. And at that point, you've got the EC Fiber model that can then go out and access the capital markets. But until you get there, you're at that high risk point. And that's where VITA is being asked to finance. So hence the need for that support from the state. And hence taking the baby steps at first. So to date, we've had nominal activity in the program, mostly because the CUDs have taken some time to get going. But now there's, quite a bit of interest in the program. And I have heard, through testimony as well as through contact with our loan officers, we do know that there's quite a bit of interest in coming to VITA and coming to VITA to ask for the maximum loan amount of $4 million. So clearly, $10.8 million loan program is not gonna cut it, especially if we've already funded out about half of that. So, so as far as VITA's role in H360, I frankly don't see our role changing, in that our role is to look at loan applications, analyze them for their credit worthiness, and test the assumptions, and do what VITA does very well, which is underwriting, and hopefully, if it's a valid application, well thought out, we'll approve the loan and book it, close it, and service it. So that, in a nutshell, is what we see us doing. Now, there is a new component in H360 that talks about subordinated debt and grants. And the grant piece was relatively last minute with what's being called the ARPA money coming in. And so I'm not sure what VITA's role will be with that, but it's written in the bill as VITA will service any loans that are made by the new broadband authority. Again, that's something that we do all the time under what we call our affiliate loan programs with other state agencies, where we service drinking water loans, clean water loans, brownfield loans, and so on. So that's normal course of business as well. So with that, I will stop because I'm sure you have questions, and I do want to allow time for your questions.
Well, as we move through this, we suddenly have a whole lot of money, and we have some really startup agencies. A large number of them are less than a year old. My question after listening to Ms. Nolte is, who's approving their business plans? And do you see VITA as, we're concerned about grants and loans and not just throwing, good money after bad. Do you see VITA as having any ability to help us, or to help perhaps the CUDs going forward in making good financial decisions?
That is a very good question. One of the struggles I think the CUDs are having is putting together a team of experts in the various fields that are needed, whether it's the technology, the finance, the contracting. And finance is certainly needed. And the dilemma that we have with Vita is, you know, and you find this with banks, we can't put ourselves in the position of being an advisor,
Okay, yep.
especially if we are also a lender or a potential lender. But there is.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Yep.
And so, you know, I think that one of the things that the legislature in putting together this bill, or whatever the final bill ends up being, and whatever new authority, if there is a new authority created, that those folks that are tasked to be part of that, that's really important. Because, for instance, if there's a new broadband authority that's going to be involved in making decisions on subordinated loans, as was contemplated before the ARPA money sort of became more of a reality, then there should be financial sort of banking or underwriting expertise on that board to be making those decisions. And then how does that sort of, how does that interact with Vita if we're going to be also involved in that same transaction, making the senior loan? And so, I mean, those are all things that can be worked out, but it would be very important to have that expertise, and that expertise needs to be at the CUDs as well. And I know that that's a struggle because they're you know, just a lot of them are doing it because they know it needs to get done, and they're either volunteers or well underpaid for what they're trying to do.
Okay, Senator Brock.
Just a couple of questions. One is, am I correct that Vita does not and is not set up to do equity investments? Is that correct?
That is generally correct, yes. We have, what we have done in the past is through we have the Vermont Seed Fund, where that when we did receive ARA money, we did make an investment in the Vermont Seed Fund. So that would be the closest thing to an equity investment, but we do not have an ongoing sort of venture capital business, no.
Is that something that you would consider, given the amount of money involved and the fact that, according to federal rules, we can't loan it out?
You know, I mean, I have wanted to consider doing that even before that came along. I just don't really know how to do it from a, you know, where do I get the money standpoint. I'd love to sort of brainstorm and noodle on that one. I think that the conversation of, you know, doing, I guess if you're getting at the grants versus debt question, and what kind of analysis goes into making the grants, or are you truly saying, you know, equity investments versus grants, which is different? Is that the, is that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So what kind of, so are you talking about like
Like for a CUD,
an equity investment in a CUD?
correct. Or an operating entity that would operate the CUD.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that would be intriguing.
Okay.
I'm
So you might want to talk with Beth Pierce, because I've had some discussions with her, and again, the same issue of just noodling around. Does it make sense? And if so, how?
Yeah.
The second question I have is regarding loan loss reserves.
Mhm.
These are risky investments, to say the least, and some lenders would want to see some reserves. if you were looking at reserves, though, given the restrictions that we have that we can't use borrowed money, do you have any thoughts about how you can make the reserves permanent?
Yeah, we ran into this trouble with the CARES money. So I would be surprised if the guidance were different with, and I don't know if it's come out yet for the new money.
It hasn't, I don't think, except that you can't do loans. Anything else?
So if you can't do loans, my guess is you wouldn't be able to use it for reserves either, in that you would come up with the same hurdle.
Mhm.
If the reserves were not used at the end of that time period, you'd have to give them back to the federal government.
Mhm.
That we had that checked out. I know the state had it checked out, and then VITA ourselves, we engaged another firm to check that out as well, and that was what we came up against.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Sandra Sorotkin. You're muted, Michael. Still muted.
My
There
apologies.
you go.
My apologies. So when the bill talks about subordinated loans, my understanding is that you may be put in a position where your loans, which may be primary now, could become secondary. How do you just, does that upset your balance sheets at all, or the credit worthiness of the loan? I mean, do you have concerns about that terminology in the bill?
So the way H60 is written is the subordinated debt would not be VITA debt. That would be the debt that this new broadband authority would be issuing. The VITA debt would still be senior debt.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to spend a day on the envisioned financial structure because I'm struggling with it.
Yeah, I'm happy to take any phone calls. I know it's and VITA's financial balance sheet is a complicated one as well, and we haven't even gotten into that, and I don't really want to, because who wants to do that at 4:38 on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon? But I am happy to take any phone calls or emails from anybody to go into that further.
I think as we move forward, we have a lot of money in play and it needs to go out quickly. And there seems to be a lot of desire to put it out through relatively new and unsophisticated structures. We have one CUD that's been around for 10 years and has some sophistication. The other ones, not so much. And I found Ms. Nulty's comment about engineering and how engineering is different on the last mile than the first 10. Disturbing today. That's the first time I've heard that, and that your average engineer might not understand it. So we're trying to figure out a way to get the money out, to not have it go back, to get broadband out to everybody or as many as humanly possible, and yet ensure that that money is well used and that we don't end up having spent a lot of money and not getting anything near what we hoped for or thought we were getting, or finding out that things happen to money that shouldn't have. And I think we're trying to figure out how we set that structure and who sets it. I don't think I saw anything here about or did I see? Yes, the chair of the board is getting paid. But to get somebody with the kind of technical and financial expertise, not to mention negotiating skills and handholding, is going to be challenging, especially for a job that at most is looked at as lasting 3 to 5 years. So this, I think, may give all of us a few sleepless nights. So any other questions? And Cassie, anything you can think of that we might consider? And then again, we have our structures, but we also have some of the traditional investor-owned ISPs, which are out there, which do have the expertise and the sources. And I think we've just got to weigh all these pros and cons before we make any decisions. So, committee, Senator Bray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to check in on timing a little bit. You were referencing the need to get money out quickly. And I know that we were under that gun with the CARES money because it had the end of year spending deadline that ended up moving very belatedly. But when you say that, is that, you know, that urgency that I think I hear you talking about, is that related to just wanting to get as much work done as soon as possible? Or are you thinking about like legal deadlines that are driving things?
I think I'm thinking both. First, we have to get this bill out, which is somewhat constricted timing. Next, I mean, we're talking 3 years, but 3 years to set up a structure, or in this case, we are setting up multiple small structures, bring them up to the level of skill and sophistication where they can do what we want them to do, get the fiber out, getting the fiber, it sounds like, getting the workforce, getting it out and getting people hooked up in 3 years. Starts to feel something like, you know, getting this country ready for war in World War II, you know, and going, but it's that much of a transformation because we have been doing this basically on $10,000, $20,000 a year that's come out of the connectivity fund. And we really don't have the structure set up to deal with this much money.
Right. Meg, can I ask a follow-up, please? So I know that we're dealing with a similar dynamic in the weatherization question. You know, that there's a certain capacity to do that work, and we were actually aiming in the next decade to double and double again the rate at which we get that work done. So then it's like, okay, where are the limitations in being able to get there? Workforce is definitely one. There are some, I'm really thinking of a question to some of the folks who are still on the call, maybe. For instance, the capstones, the OEOs, the community action agencies, they said about as much money, additional money as they could spend productively in the next 2 years was a 20% increase because they just couldn't go faster than that. And I wonder, as we talk about this, who has the capacity and how much is it, as opposed to finding and creating new staff, you know, from scratch or attracting people to Vermont.
I think that's a question we're going to have to ask
Okay.
before we make any. And to me, the first question we have to say is, what is our goal? You know, I mean, is it to get everybody hooked up, or is it to create CUDs who will then get everybody hooked up? But what's our goal? And then what what are the decision points as we work through that? I've got, and there's workforce, there's engineering, there's financing, there's who's in, who's out. We've got a lot of decisions to make in a very short amount of time. We can always come back and do the notwithstanding next year, but the better we set this up. And that was very clear. Chris Campbell, Holly Grosvenor, when we said, so what went wrong with the VTA? They said is you have to have very clear goals and standards. That's our job, so that they know what we expect them to do. And then I think we need to give them some shelter from political changes in opinion. But I think it's, first of all, we have to decide what our goals are, and then how do we want to achieve those goals? And then last we get to, is that just give it all to somebody and let them worry about it? Or is that a 3-person, 5-person, 6-person? What do you call it? Who pays them? Are there committee all of those things that half those bills are full of. To me, that's the last thing you do. First, you decide what you want to achieve. But I could be wrong.
Thank you.
Mr. Birnbaum, help. You're muted, Michael. That's my mantra. You're muted, Michael.
I know. Sorry, Senator.
I got another Michael who's muted on a regular basis, as am I.
I want to say that what you just said was a very wise overview of how to approach this overall problem. But I wanted to address Senator Bray's question with a brief answer. EC Fiber has discovered over the last several years that 200 to 300 miles a year was their optimum build. If we are to achieve what everyone's trying to achieve now, that's going to have to be increased. And the reason they were limited was twofold. The pole make ready from the utilities, whether they were the phone company or the electric utilities, the availability of workforce, the availability of Eustis bucket trucks. Those are the two constricting things. You can do more than 200 miles in a year. And Jeff Austin just explained that they are doing that and consolidated now with their workforce and using Eustis. So the key thing is, can you bring in construction companies or help Eustis grow quickly? And can you get cooperation from the utilities? Both are possible, and we're all working on that. And tomorrow I'm going to Memphis to meet with a consortium of RDOF winners who are setting up a buying co-op to make sure that we have all materials we need on a week's notice from anywhere in the country. And we're also setting up a co-op of construction companies so that we can bring in outside. But that's the answer to your question is it depends on workforce availability and make ready and materials.
Maybe we should go down the southern border and see if we can't recruit some people. Because it was Miss Nolte who was talking about getting a young man that was working in a grocery store and training him. I think that's, of course, we've been trying to do that with healthcare, childcare, and now we have line folks, and we spent days, was it last year or the year before, on pole harvesting and make ready. And we did some changes, but I don't know. And that's probably something we need to hear about. Did those changes work? And if they didn't, how do we do it? Last year, we were talking about, was it $90,000 to have the Google car drive around and do the pole harvesting for us? We need to hear, I thought somebody had done that partially, but if not, we need to, is that still a viable option? And then who owns it? But we're gonna have a busy few weeks. We don't have a lot of bills. The revenue bill got released today. So we'll take a look at that. Senator Pearson, S53 is coming back to us. It's coming back to us with the corporate tax changes, the cloud tax, and one other tax attached to it.
Okay.
I'm sure you're thrilled to introduce, as the chair said, it is the only meaningful tax bill we've sent them so far. It is on its way back, but we may just follow our plan for the original bill and stick it on miscellaneous. And I don't think we're going to get to do broadband and rewrite the corporate income tax system this year. Senator Bray.
I didn't know if you could see it. Mr. Nishi has had his hand up.
No, I didn't. Mr. Nishi.
Thank you, Senator Bray, and thank you, Madam Chair.
I do see Ms. Nolte now.
Within the current document of 360, there is the discussion about the Department of Public Service being able to allocate 900 million, or not 900 million, 9 million under the program for planning to the CUDs before September 30th. But there's no discussion within the document of possibly getting funding out to those that can build immediately. If there's a 3-year time period, some of us could start using that money today and building it and putting it into our networks. So if there could be some discussion of that at some point in time, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, yeah. And anybody that's out there, just drop me an email, drop our committee staff Faith an email. Anything you think needs to be discussed. We're intending to go through this very tightly. Okay, Ms. Nolte. No, you're muted.
Apologies.
No.
While we're on the subject of potential shortages and overcoming them, I would just like draw the committee's attention to the fact that while we heard a very intriguing and promising presentation from Consolidated, the fact of the matter is that when I'm in contact with their people who are responsible for managing their Make Ready and the policy and the applications, you know, when VEC and Consolidated have joint ownership of poles in the territories where we're building. So when we make a pole application, we have to make 2 applications, one to VEC and one to Consolidated, and Consolidated immediately knows where we're building, and they are having trouble processing these pole applications and write-outs and make-ready estimates because they cut their staffing in the office that handles those things. So they're putting money into expanding their network, which is good, but they've cut money that would help support other people who are trying to expand their networks. So we have a little bit of a
business decision
there. And
okay.
I don't know how to resolve it, but I leave that with you to consider.
I think I am just having an aversion to going back to anything that says poll ready because it was another painful discussion. But I think we are going to have to go back and hear from you folks about, we made some changes, what's worked, what hasn't worked, has the 6-month time frame come down at all? And then strings can be put on contracts.
I
Yeah,
would like
yeah.
to share a recent story, which is just too wonderful not to pass up and share.
Okay.
This was from Vermont Electric Co-op, who've been wonderful to work with, no complaints. But we got a recent message, sorry, the make ready on this particular poll application is delayed because we have to set new polls amongst a maple syrup tapping enterprise, and we can't do it until the maple tapping season is over. This was a first ever. It
That
was
is
so
a Vermont.
wonderful.
I thought you were going to say because the pileated woodpecker made a big hole in it.
No.
That is a Vermont story. Okay. Committee, everyone, thank you. Senator Sirotkin, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to, not a question, a comment. I wanted to piggyback on what I was reading between the lines in Senator Bray's comment. We're a citizen legislature, and if we're going to try and take on the minutia of how to design spending several $100 million on broadband and given 5 working days to do it, I can't get myself there. I have no problem with dealing with 360 and setting up a structure to turn this over to people with expertise. But if you're asking the legislature to weigh in that sort of time frame on such a big issue, I think it's a formula that's a real problem. So I think we need to limit our scope here. And if you're going to ask the legislature to do this, maybe we could come back next year with the vast majority of this money and figure out how to spend it and take a deep breath for 6 or 8 months where all kinds of ideas will surface around the country and we might be better prepared to do that. But to do that in a few working days with being a citizen legislature with very little staff, it's not my style.
And we have Zoom. No, my goal right now is to set our goals, to think about what we want to have achieved, get some priorities set up some structure to move this whole thing forward when we're not in session. I think we've gotten fair amount of money out to keep the CUDs going. We may need to set up some funding or structure for them to get, we heard legal. I'm going through my notes. The last time they were in a month ago, they need help drawing up legal documents, partnerships, agreements, whatever they are. It sounds like they might need some engineering and make sure that, we can come up with a list of engineers who understand last mile. They may need somebody they can consult with in the department until we get something else as to what is in a good contract. What's the standard price you pay for X, Y, and Z type of consultant, but some broad outlines to make sure that they have the support they need. The department has the support the department needs until and when we set something else up. And we probably need to talk about some workforce or kick that down to you, Senator. And talk about some workforce development and how do we do that? Maybe we could get some of the loggers out of Rygate.
Win-win.
Okay, yeah. All right, Senator McDonald, that's your assignment. You were to go down there and start signing them up. Then we got to find a course, but
Are we ready to go offline, Madam Chair?
I think we are ready to go